congressional candidate in Washington state is arguing for a $30 an hour minimum wage. This is Rebecca Parson. She is running in Washington's 6th district as a Democrat, except she's more of a socialist. In her campaign video, she advocates for housing for all, Medicare for all, food for all, and no more poverty. So she also claimed that she will try to emulate squad member Congresswoman Cori Bush. Now, Parson is not the only progressive running in the 2022 midterm elections, but her Twitter rants are making her stand out. She said, $30 minimum wage or bust. She says that includes you, Elon fanboys. Rising tide lifts all boats. Joining me now, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors, Seth Denson. Seth, thank you so much for joining me. Seth, a $30 an hour minimum wage, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and a rising wage lifts all prices.
Yeah.
I think this is obviously somebody who really doesn't understand economics. And you need to look further than Seattle, who was one of the nation's first to move to the $15 minimum wage, to see that the cost of living actually went up there when they did that. And many businesses and corporations decided to move out. And what we saw was this really hurts that working class, because what happens is hours are cut. If I got to pay you $30 an hour, I'm just not going to have as many hours, and I'm going to look to people like Elon who say maybe we can use robotics and technology more. And that's just the reality of things. I think to get elected, this candidate thinks that she can I say she? Because I don't know what's proper anymore. But nonetheless, this candidate, I think I should say, is one of those that thinks that they need to offer free everything to get elected. But here's the reality. She lost her first primary in 2020. So my hope is that she loses maybe this one too.
I'm wondering what she's paying her campaign staffers. Probably not $30 an hour, and I'm sure she's got a ton of volunteers, right? It'd be good to know, because I remember all those folks like Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They would all get bashed because their campaign employees were making like no money. That's how socialists operate. And also, too, there's another article talking about how the squad could grow stronger because more socialists are jumping into the midterm election races.
Well, and that's a reality, and I tell you, that's a risk. I mean, I wrote an article recently saying, thank God for Joe Manchin, effectively saving the Republic, in my opinion. And he's a Democrat who I'm not normally known to praise a lot of. But the reality is we're losing the moderates. And if the Republicans retake the House of Representatives, which they likely will, it's going to give the likes of AOC and the squad members the ability to say, see, you should have gone our way, which was further left, and we may have maintained it. Not Nancy Pelosi, which it's weird to say that Nancy Pelosi is a moderate, but comparatively, I guess she is, and Chuck Schumer. And so I think that this could move the pendulum. You're going to start hearing more about Medicare for all again. While Bernie didn't win, Bernie moved the party left, and the squad growing in size can be a challenge going forward. And unfortunately, it looks like that just might happen.
Yeah, and again, what they're promoting on its face doesn't sound bad. Yeah, like we want to eliminate poverty. It would be great to have affordable housing, right? A $30 minimum wage sounds great, but as you pointed out, it just doesn't work when you actually try to put it into play. And historically speaking, we've been shown that socialism, communism, those type of things don't work. And for some reason, these socialist candidates haven't got the message, or they have, and they just don't care. And it's all about power and control for them. Speaking of housing, there is question whether or not the real estate market has peaked. Do you think it has?
I don't know that I think it's peaked. It may have peaked in certain areas. For example, as we start to see interest rates go up, places like California, sorry, Steph, you know, it's one thing to go buy a $200,000 house in Texas and have an 8% mortgage. It's quite differently in California, where that same $200,000 house is $2 million and I got an 8% mortgage. So I think in certain parts of the country, we will have seen it peaked. But I think in those places that have been red hot during the pandemic, rural places, red states with different governmental structures, I think that we've got a long time till we see the peak.
Yeah, in California, in my area, you can get a shoe box with no updates for like the small fee of $1 million, right? The real estate market out here is insane. Now, I want to shift gears here and talk about Russia. Apparently, some of the businesses that are out there who have made commitments to leave are struggling to actually exit.
Yeah, it's one thing if I want to say I'm going to stop making burgers, shut off the lights, and send everybody home. It's another thing if I say I'm running a global accounting firm that actually has very wide reach and tentacles and a very entangled web of global currency all along, multiple different currency levels. Places like Deloitte, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, who, by the way, a lot of times are just selling their name in these countries, but unfortunately, because of contractual obligations, they can't just pull out. And nor do we really want them to. I know it sounds good, and we want companies to say, hey, we're backing off of Russia, but here's the reality. Many U.S. assets are intertwined with assets that are also holding Russian assets. And so you've got to look at the reality that we are in a global economy, and we need these accounting firms to stay in place, if for nothing else, to understand what's the true value of those monetary features over there.
Yeah, and okay, well, it's great that they get out of there, but the big thing is we have countries like Germany who are still paying lots of money and funding the war machine there. So, we appreciate the effort, but there's a lot more that needs to be done in regards to, taking down Putin. Now, speaking of Russia, we know that Netflix did suspend service out there, but we also found out that Netflix has taken a huge hit, and some people like me think, well, maybe it's because, when you go woke, you go broke. And a lot of the content on the Netflix service, like what they're putting out there, is stuff that not all Americans can relate to. I mean, there was like a recent show that they put out of like a pregnant man. Well, I'm not going to watch that.
Yeah, no, and I certainly don't need my 6-year-old learning how to twerk in a child-related show watching it either. I think that is part of the problem. But listen, if it was all about wokeness, so would Disney go broke, and so would Amazon and some of these others that have put out fairly equal shows. Here's the problem with Netflix. They're putting out garbage programming, period, woke or not. And they've got competitors. And so if you look at where Netflix was in 2019, pre-pandemic, early days of 2019, this was around a $250 stock. It's at closing, or it's right now, I think, priced today around $200 a share. It did peak up, but that was during the pandemic when everybody was staying at home and looking for different things to do. But it should be around a $250, $300 stock. But here's their bigger problem. There's a lot of competition in the space, and there's competition that has loss leaders. For example, Amazon looks at Amazon Prime Video as a loss leader to keep people loyal to the brand. Same thing with Disney, and same thing with Apple. You got companies like Hulu's competition, but also offers live TV programming. Netflix has stayed in their box, and what's interesting is they became big by competing against Blockbuster for thinking out of the box, and now they're stuck in it. And unfortunately, I don't know that there's any place for them to go with the way things are structured now. This is not a stock I would want to hold.
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, a lot has to do with content. And yeah, there's going to be tons of competition. That's how things work. But if they don't have the content there, then people are going to stray. Well, Seth, we got to leave it here. We appreciate you breaking this all down. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.